If you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, for a better experience, switch to the video version. The link is in the top right corner of the video and in the episode description. Hello and welcome. I'm Fernando, a GP in the UK. Today we're reviewing the NICE guideline on hypertension in adults, always focusing on what is relevant in primary care only. We're focusing on the diagnosis and initial assessment. In subsequent episodes, we will cover the other sections. Right, let's jump into it. And let's start about the measurement of blood pressure. Because automated devices may not measure blood pressure accurately, if there is pulse irregularity, for example, due to atrial fibrillation, we should palpate the radial pulse or brachial pulse before measuring blood pressure. If pulse irregularity is present, we should measure blood pressure manually using direct auscultation over the brachial artery. When measuring blood pressure in the clinic or in the home, we should standardize the environment and provide a relaxed and temperate setting with the person quiet and seated and the arm outstretched and supported. In addition, we should make sure that we use the right cuff size for the person's arm. Now let's look at postural hypotension. In people with symptoms of postural hypotension, including falls or postural dizziness, we should measure blood pressure with a person lying on the back, although we can consider a seated position if it is inconvenient to measure blood pressure with a person lying down. We should then measure blood pressure again after the person has been standing for at least 1 minute. If the person's systolic blood pressure falls by 20 millimeters of mercury or more, or the diastolic blood pressure falls by 10 millimeters of mercury or more after standing for 1 minute, we should consider likely causes, including reviewing their current medication. We should also manage appropriately, for example, giving advice on preventing falls, and we should measure subsequent blood pressures with the person standing. Additionally, we should consider referral to specialist care if symptoms of postural hypertension persist despite addressing the likely causes. If the drop in blood pressure is smaller than the diagnostic threshold and the person still has suggestive symptoms, we should repeat the test. This is especially important if the initial reading was taken from a seated position. This is because the drop in blood pressure from sitting to standing may be smaller than from lying down to standing, which can lead to false negatives. So this time we should start with the person lying flat and then measure the blood pressure again after they stand up. We should then consider specialist referral if blood pressure measurements do not confirm postural hypotension despite suggestive symptoms. Let's look at how we make the diagnosis of hypertension. When considering the diagnosis, we should measure blood pressure in both arms. If the difference between arms is more than 15 millimeters of mercury, we should repeat the measurements, and if the difference remains more than 15, we should use the arm with a higher reading for future measurements. Now, if clinic blood pressure is 140/90 or higher, we should take a second measurement during the same consultation. If the second reading is substantially different from the first, we should take a third measurement. We then record the low of the two readings as the clinic blood pressure. If the clinic blood pressure is between 140/90 and 180/120, we should offer ambulatory blood pressure monitoring to confirm the diagnosis. If ambulatory blood pressure monitoring is not suitable or not tolerated, we should offer home blood pressure monitoring instead. While waiting to confirm the diagnosis, we should calculate the cardiovascular risk assessment using a validated tool, and we should also carry out investigations for target organ damage. If the clinic blood pressure is 180/120 or higher, we should consider whether they need urgent referral. We will cover both the urgent referral criteria and the investigations for target organ damage in the next episode. When using ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, we should ensure that at least 2 measurements are taken per hour during the person's usual waking hours, for example between 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. We should use the average of at least 14 measurements during waking hours to confirm the diagnosis. When using home blood pressure monitoring, we should ensure that 2 consecutive readings are taken for each recording, at least 1 minute apart, with the person seated, and the blood pressure should be recorded twice daily, ideally in the morning and in the evening, and that monitoring should continue for at least 4 days, but ideally for 7 days. In home blood pressure monitoring, we should discard the first day's readings and use the average of the remaining measurements to confirm the diagnosis. We will confirm hypertension if the clinic blood pressure is 140/90 or higher, and the ambulatory blood pressure monitoring daytime average or home blood pressure monitoring average is 135/85 or higher. If hypertension is not diagnosed, but there is evidence of target organ damage, we should consider investigating for alternative causes. If hypertension is not diagnosed, we should recheck clinic blood pressure at least every 5 years, more frequently if the readings are close to 140/90. However, we should measure blood pressure at least once a year in adults with type 2 diabetes who do not have previously diagnosed hypertension or renal disease. Additionally, we should consider the need for specialist investigations in people who have signs and symptoms suggestive of a secondary cause of hypertension. So that is it, a review of a section of the NICE guideline on hypertension. We have come to the end of this episode. Remember that this is not medical advice, but only my summary and my interpretation of the guidelines. You must always use your clinical judgment. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.